Hey everybody, Ben with BRG. Again, it's been a while. Actually, it's about time I did a video. In fact, that's what we're going to talk about today. It's kind of silly, but whatever. Talk about timing, counting, etc. I'm a big advocate of understanding rhythms and being able to count, because that's really what music comes down to is rhythm. You know, without rhythm, you have no music. You have noise. And so counting is one of those things that I think is important, understanding your different note values, etc. So when you're thinking about music, typically a lot of what you're going to do is count it in fours, right? Your measures are 4 quarter notes. You know, think of your measure as $1, cut it into 4, they're quarters, right? You count to 4. Now this isn't always true. You can count to different time signatures and everything, but for today's purposes, we want to count just to 4. Okay, and I'm going to explain the different note values and stuff or whatever, and I'm just going to use some simple chords to help demonstrate how to count. So for example, the first note value you're going to encounter is a whole note, which fills an entire measure. So if you're counting that, you count, like, set yourself up 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Real simple. You play on the 1 and let the thing go all the way through. Now your next note value is a half note, which is 2 beats, right? Because it's like a $50, cut it in half. Now these can be played on the first, the third, or the second, depending on what other note values you have, beats of the measure. When you're first learning them, you want to play on the 1 and play on the 3. So like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that. So if I did a combination of the two, you'd be like, I'll do like a whole note of 1 chord and a half note measure of another. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I did was I played a whole note C and then played half note G's. Okay, that gives you something that kind of sounds musical. You know, and the same thing applies to single notes. You know, the same kind of thing can be applied to single notes because it's just rhythm, and rhythm applies to everything you do in music. All right, wholes and halves, right? So moving on, subdivided down quarter notes, you play on every beat. It's really easy to do because you don't have to think as much. You're constantly moving, right? So if I did the same chord, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? You're playing on every beat. So you can take and do combinations of those types of things. You can play 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just to mix it up. Come up with your own ideas based on these patterns, and it becomes very apparent quickly how easy it is to get music going without really knowing a whole lot. You know, a couple chords and you count, you can really start to get some stuff done. Okay, now like I talked about when I first introduced half notes, you can do combinations of half notes and quarter notes in one measure. You play like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's one version where you play quarter notes on 1 and 2, and a half note on 3 and 4. Would flip that over, you've got, you'd be able to half note first, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, to make it even trickier, you can put the half note in the middle and bracket it with quarter notes. So 1 would be a quarter note, 2 and 3 would be your half note, 4 would be your quarter note again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, like that. So it gets a little more interesting. Things become, the more rhythmic options you have, the more interesting things can be. Now, I've talked about permutations and stuff in my previous videos. I've done a bunch of different things like that. That's one aspect of it, just the permutations of like what your fingers, your pick hand, or whatever can do. And if you're just playing like eighth notes or quarter notes, that's one version. Factor in your rhythmic variations, wholes, halves, quarters, eighth notes, which we'll talk about, sixteenths, triplets, 16-note triplets, 30-second notes, all these variations, groups of 7, groups of 5, things get crazy. Your options explode into the millions, trillions, whatever, because there's so many possibilities, right? So let's move on beyond that. So when you typically see people doing this kind of stuff, they're doing like eighth notes when they're playing like a strumming pattern. Now, eighth note is when you play the count like a quarter note, and then you play the space right between the two counts, and you count that by using the word and. And picking wise, you typically, when you first start out, you go, the number is your downstroke and the and is your upstroke, okay? So if I play a measure of like a G like I did earlier, but play it as eighth notes, it'd be like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You know what I mean? So try that. Go slow and get used to how it counts. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now you can combine that with your other note values and get some pretty interesting things going on, right? That would be like half notes combined with eighth notes, and you can start to come up with different variations of that. Okay, so eighth notes are a super handy tool and something you want to get a handle on to understand how to play a lot of songs. In fact, a lot of the chord changes and whatnot you're going to encounter are going to be based on eighth note patterns. And the cool thing about eighth notes is once you get used to how they move, you can apply that to sixteenths. Sixteenths are just like eighth notes, but twice as fast. And we'll talk about how to count those in a minute. But the basic understanding is eighth notes and getting used to the downs and the ups and how to count that and how to feel it out. There's a ton of variations that come into play with eighth notes. You can use like misses and stuff to imply quarter notes. It makes things a lot more interesting. Those spaces, this is going constantly, but you're picking where you want to in your count, right? Say like that first little bit I was doing, like 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. You can make it more interesting by doing what's called a dotted quarter note, which is basically a dotted note is any note, its own value plus half of its original value. So like on a half note, a dotted half note would be 3 beats long because it is, 2 beats plus half of that, which is 1. So a dotted half note would be played like 1, 2, 3, and then a quarter note 4, just to fill the measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can also add in an eighth note. You can do a dotted half, and then you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 3. And that brings to point a really interesting thing now they talk about, you hear about rests. Rests have the same kind of ideas. You've got whole note rests, whole rests, half rests, quarter rests, eighth rests, etc. They're the same value in silence of the note values, So if I was to do like an eighth note rest on that last pattern, I'd have like the dotted half, an eighth note rest on the downbeat, and then the upbeat of 4 would be played. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, then rest on 4, then. Which sounds different than doing a miss, because when you do that rest, it's supposed to be silent. You get that choppy kind of sound, which is really cool. So those things are kind of the little bits of stuff I want to get you used to, right? Because timing is everything. I've got drum students that I teach guitar students, I teach bass students, and common in all the instruments is rhythm. And if you're not counting something properly, you're not hearing the rhythm properly, you won't get the part. It won't make any sense when you go to play it. So that's why I think this is so critical. And this is something I want to cover for a while. I just haven't gotten around to it because I keep busy. All right. So the next thing after eighth notes would be like a triplet, which would be your next kind of like an eighth note triplet is what they call it. There's a couple different ways you can encounter these. The simplest version would be to play a pattern that is 3 notes for each beat in a measure of 4. And the cool thing about these odd numbered patterns like a triplet is that every other beat is going to start with a different stroke. So, the easiest way to count these, I learned this when I played drums years ago, is to say the word triplet, but add a syllable and say triplet, triplet, triplet. Now, if you strum that and you play a nice slow pattern, something like that. Now, like I said earlier, your picking is going to switch directions. You don't want to reset all the time. This constant motion, the up and down, is your friend. It helps you get it done without too much work in the right arm. And this is something I learned kind of without knowing these things, playing like a song like Raining Blood or something by Slayer, where it's a 16th note with one of the notes chopped off. And you don't alternate your gallops, they're always starting with the same direction because your overall motion is constantly back and forth, but you're just missing one of those guys, right? Case in point, there's some videos on YouTube of explaining the Steve Harris gallop on the bass, and it's the same principle. Your constant motion is whatever, but you're cutting one of them out. And once you get that down, it makes a lot of sense. Drummers too, they're playing like this, but they're going to miss one of those, that right hand's going to stay constant where they need it to get the motion going and the timing right. So that's a little bit about triplets. They can be really cool. Real quick, I'm going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, triplet, 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 triplet. I always nod my head to kind of accent it when I tell people how this works. After triplets, our next rhythm in the scale, the rhythm scale they call it, is going to be a 16th note. Now 16th notes are basically eighth notes but twice as fast. Now the cool thing about a 16th note is that when you play an eighths, you're playing 1 and 2 and. Now when you play 16ths, you're going to count it 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. You want to get used to counting it. Once you get to a certain speed, you stop saying it out loud because you just can't keep up. Your breath dies. But your picking is now, your and is a downstroke because you're hitting 1 E and a, like a. You can count it like that with your 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. You can also count it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you have two options there. A lot of times when I'm learning something extremely fast or extremely intricate, I'll break it down to like eighth notes just to make it easier to count, which works to some degree. Now, to get it right up to speed, you start to think of it as 16 notes, but when you're first learning something really hard, you can break it down to the simplest like eighth note kind of pattern and just do that, you know. So that's an option. Now, 60 notes and triplets play really nice together. There was a video I had years ago. It was Frank Gambale's like 72-minute guitar workout or something like that, right? And he was doing scales, and he'd play the scale, you know, like ascend triplets, descend 16ths. And I think he actually like that, where he did it like that. And he got to the point where he was, and he goes further, he breaks it down to where he's alternating rhythms through the scale. So if you listen to this, the count would be triplet 2E and a triplet 4E and a triplet 2E and a triplet 4E and a. Like that, and I threw in the little quarter note or whatever at the end there to kind of give me some space. He did it constantly, which was really cool, and it got me thinking about rhythms and stuff, you know. And this is before I had ever had a metronome or thought about, you know, those kinds of things in that kind of depth. But they applies to chords too, you know. You know, you can split it up. You just have to learn how to count it. And some of that kind of sounded crappy, you know. Doing that kind of pattern with the triplets is that it sets your 16 notes up to where you have to start with an upstroke, which is not typically what you do when you practice 16 notes. But as you advance, you want to be able to play 16 notes, triplets, whatever variation, starting from either direction. Okay, that's just a little bit, maybe a little more technical than some of you guys want to go, but it's something that I would think about, you know, because in any given situation, you might need the direction, you know, to be backwards. Or if you mess up playing live, being able to recover from the opposite motion can be really helpful. You know, if you start everything the same and you're very precise, it's going to work. But it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you might get hung up. You You know, you might burp or something in the middle of playing and just lose where you're at. You know, or a mosquito lands on your eyebrow or you're trying to play a live show. That happens and it sucks. But you got to deal with it. Now, after 16th notes, you start to get into some crazy stuff. Like 16-note triplets is really a common thing. That's an even number deal that's 2 groups of triplets per beat. And it's really cool. And it starts to get fast. I'm going to go back to 5s here in a second. But think of the song One by Metallica, that rapid fire thing at the end on the double bass that they block in with the guitar. That's a 16-note triplet and a quarter note. Like that. You know, I think of it as, like, I tell people to count triplet, triplet, stop, triplet, triplet, stop, or triplet, triplet, 2, triplet, triplet, 4, triplet, triplet, 2, triplet, triplet, 4. Because if you're off, you shouldn't end with a down. It should always end with a downstroke. And then it makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of us like when I was growing up, I just tried to play as fast as I could and then stop when I need to stop. And in doing so, added a couple notes and ended up playing 30-second notes without even thinking about it. And that's really working way too hard to play the part, but good for your hands. Groups of 5 are a little crazy because they're odd and they really work nice on piano because you're using all 5 fingers. You can do like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing, right? It really makes sense when you play single note lines and count, like it's got that kind of like change direction kind of feel to it, which is really cool about 5s. And the same's true of 7s, which would be one beyond 16-note triplets, sorry, which would be like. Just do your own version of these, get used to how they work. A good exercise with all these values is to start a metronome painfully slow, because some of these values you're going to just struggle with as you get faster. You know, set it at 50 to 60 beats a minute, and then try to play as far as you can through your values in time, where you're hitting where you want to hit against the click or your footfall. You know, I'm big on getting used to playing to the metronome and keeping either foot in time with the metronome, because you have to know where you're at all times, right? And that's something I want you to work on too, is to be able to just keep time without the metronome. You know, get used to playing to a metronome, get that internal meter built to where you're constantly accurate and you always know where you're at. You know what it feels like, where the pulse is, no matter what the pace, and you can play within the context of the pulse. That's why you practice to a metronome. Take it through this, through the range and play whatever passage you're trying to do. Beyond where you need to go speed-wise, because you're always trying to get faster, but getting used to how that rhythm feels and being able to play in the pocket across the range of tempos. But that's a little bit about rhythm. It's a huge subject, and I could spend a long time on this, but I want to give you some things to think about. If you have questions about different rhythms or anything, hit me up. But really, it's getting the first number of them down: wholes, halves, quarters, eighths, triplets, and sixteenths. That's a huge thing to work on, because a lot of the music you're going to listen to is going to be based on that. You start getting into stuff by bands like Dream Theater and some of the crazy shred stuff you get into, you start talking about 5s and 7s and these other things too that are going to come into play. But those are the big ones to work on. And I went a little further than I would have normally wanted to, but there's a lot out there and I want you aware of it, you know, moving forward. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been a while since I posted. It was about time, so the video was about time. And I hope that gives you something to work on. Today's guitar is a Dean Select V in the trans black. The pickups in it are the EMG headset, and this guitar plays really nice. I had to do a little setup on it when it got here. The bridge was jacked way up, but otherwise I think it sounds great, even playing clean. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned. I've got more I want to cover. I'm going to get back into my permutations of 5 and stuff and finish those before I die, etc. So anyway, our website is brgmusic.com. Our phone number is 515-329-0120. We're at 1209 2nd, Perry, Iowa. We're an authorized dealer for a lot of brands you might dig: ESP, Dean, PV, etc., G&L, of course, and some other stuff too. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Later.